talk today where we're going to be talking all about sugar and sweets. And you guys know here at CrossFit High Tide, we believe something as fundamental as nutrition should not be complicated, which is why we focus on a simple habit-based approach to help you reach your goals one step at a time. So we know that while this is simple, it is far from easy, which is why we are here to support you along the way. All right, so many studies show that a high consumption of sugar is associated with inflammation and many chronic diseases. All right, so all cells in our body, including cancer cells, need sugar, which is glucose, for energy. And some diseases that are directly linked to sugar consumption include diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. Obesity is also strongly correlated with sugar consumption and can account for at least 13 types of cancer, including breast, liver, and colon cancer. So the average American eats or drinks over 500 calories of sugar in a day, and that's about 36 teaspoons. All right, in a given year, Americans are consuming over 150 pounds of sugar. So according to the USDA, in 1822, the average American ate in 5 days the amount of sugar found in one of today's 12-ounce sodas. And now people are eating that every 7 hours. So it makes sense that the prevalence of obesity in 2018 was 42.4% for adults and 19.3% in children and adolescents. It is also clear why we are still seeing these numbers increase yearly. So the risk factors associated with high consumption of sugar or the amount of sugar may have just shocked you, and you may be wondering, like, how in the world? Think about the last time you had a sweet treat and it turned into a few more innocent handfuls, or that one cookie that all of a sudden turned into a sleeve of cookies. We have all been there. In fact, I have helped my nutrition clients navigate the sugar in their life in a mindful way. And there becomes this negative feedback loop of restricting sweet foods to having just one, you're feeling guilty, and then over consuming and going overboard. And we've all been there, but why do we struggle so much to stay mindful? You've heard that sugar is addictive, so let's talk about why. Addiction is a craving for a specific substance that involves continuous use, which becomes hazardous to your well-being, according to the FDA. So let me put it in these terms. A study that took place at the University of Minnesota found that sugary foods cause a similar effect on our brain chemicals when compared to those on drugs. So this is where the phrase "sugar is more addicting than cocaine" stems from. And so now we know how much the average person is consuming, why it is so easy for us to consume that amount when it's considered addictive, and the negative effects it has on our health. But you may be wondering, like, how much is 34 teaspoons? Like, how much really is that? Is it a lot? And the American Heart Association recommends no more than 24 grams of added sugar for women and 36 grams for men each day. And that's also 6 and 9 teaspoons of sugar respectively. So 6 for women, 9 for men. And the average American is consuming nearly 6 times the recommended limit for sugar in a given day. But we aren't likely to sit around and eat sugar cubes all day. So how are we consuming all of this sugar? Sugar can be sneaky, and sometimes sugar can hide in different types of foods without us being aware. So let's review the 3 most common foods with hidden sugar. Number 1 are convenience breakfast foods, such as oatmeal packets, bars, yogurt, and cereal. Let's break it down. A single serve oatmeal packet contains 11 to 15 grams of sugar per packet. And sugar is the second ingredient. For your Pop-Tarts or one package of pastries, it contains 30 grams of sugar, 29 grams of which is added sugar. All right, for certain kinds of yogurt, there's 14 grams of sugar per serving, and a lot of popular breakfast cereals have an average of 10 grams per 3/4 of a cup. All right, number 2 are easy grab-and-go snacks. So think about these pantry foods: trail mix, granola bars, packaged pastries, even protein bars. The trail mix that is often marketed as a heart-healthy snack contains 10 grams of sugar. A typical granola bar, such as a Nutri-Grain cereal bar, contains 12 grams of sugar. That Quaker Chewy Dip chocolate chip granola bar in our kids' lunch has 13 grams of sugar. Lastly, in this category of grab snacks are protein bars. So not all protein bars are as healthy as you may think. Some bars have 19.5 grams of sugar, which is more than a Krispy Kreme donut with 12.6 grams. All right, lastly, our beverages. And beverages have been a big topic of conversation when discussing the obesity epidemic. Here are a few shocking sugar-packed beverages. So our fat-free chocolate milk has 54 grams of sugar. Minute Maid lemonade has about 29 grams. Certain kinds of iced tea have 46 to 50 grams of sugar, depending on the flavor. 12-ounce Coke has 39 grams of sugar. And lastly, flavored creamers have about 6 grams of sugar per tablespoon, which can add up quickly if you're just pouring it into your coffee or if you have several cups per day. So think about the beverages, the lattes, quick snacks, and breakfast you and your family have had in the last week. All right, and let's take a moment to breathe after that. It's true, sugar is hidden everywhere. So what can we do? How can we decrease our sugar consumption to improve our health? Know what's in your food. And you guys have probably heard me say that a lot. You can do this by learning how to read a nutrition facts label. The new nutrition facts label, it can make it very easy to identify how much sugar is natural and how much sugar is added to a packaged food. So make sure you read the nutrition facts and ingredient labels to know exactly what you are putting in your body. And once you start looking, you're going to be surprised. Remember, when looking at the ingredients label, the first thing listed is the most abundant than any other ingredient in that food product. And where do we start? First, we want to check out the serving information found at the top. So you're going to look up top first. And for single serve bottles, cans, and packaged snacks, odds are the label will be for the entire beverage or food in hand. However, if you are getting from a larger container, it will be helpful to understand the serving size. To find the sugars, we need to look under the total carbohydrates section, and that's where you'll usually find dietary fiber, total sugars, and added sugar. This is a reminder that added sugars are the sugars that are added into a food or beverage for its shelf life and for its taste and to make you more addicted to it, okay? That's what the added means. All right, and to search further, you can bring your eyes down to the list and to the ingredient list. And there are about 60 different names for sugars on food labels. So look for things that say sugar, it ends in the OSE, such as fructose, or it has syrup in their name, like corn syrup. And now that we are aware of the sneaky sugar and how to find them, let's dive into 3 tips to enjoy sweet treats mindfully before we get to hear more about Jen's glucose monitor. So tip number 1, sugar alternatives. There are many different names for sugar, as we discussed, and while some are marketing as healthier, they all contain glucose, which causes an inflammatory response in our body. For instance, honey, maple syrup, agave, all contain grams of sugar. And here are 3 sugar substitutes to use in the kitchen that will sweeten up your foods without providing excess sugar. So cinnamon. Cinnamon hits the same taste buds without adding any grams of sugar. You can add these to your protein pancakes, your muffins, and your coffee. My favorite, which is the unsweetened shredded coconut, and it's great to add to your energy balls or sprinkle in your oatmeal, which will also add a little healthy fat. A fruit puree. It's great for baking, and no sugar added purees in baking will give you that sweet taste and also helps to moisten the baked good. Number 2, never eat carbs alone. When we eat meals and snacks that are not balanced with a protein, a carbohydrate, and a fat, we are more likely to spike up our blood sugar. When we pair protein and fat with our carb or sugar sources, we will feel fuller for longer And the slower digestion process of fat and protein allows for better glucose management. So instead of eating that packaged oatmeal alone, which we know is packed with sugar, find a lower sugar option and consider adding a hard-boiled egg on the side or a protein powder with almond butter in your oatmeal. Or my favorite, you can add some chicken sausage links for better balance. Lastly, tip number 3 is to stay mindful with portions. And we are allowed and should incorporate our favorite sweet treats, but we should do so in a mindful portion and find that balanced mindset that allows you to enjoy the cookie, but then move on instead of eating an entire sleeve. And this takes time and practice, but here are a few things you can do to help you stay mindful. Number 1 is to eat balanced meals throughout the day. It'll keep you from getting hangry and too hungry where you're just grabbing for things. Number 2, portion out the snack instead of eating right out of the container or package. Number 3, take time to enjoy the treat by putting your fork or spoon down between bites. And number 4, after consuming the treat, drink a glass of water. All right, so now I'm going to let Jen talk with you guys about her experience with tracking blood glucose with a CGM.
All right, awesome, guys. So Jamie has already kind of gone over some of the background about, sugar and why it matters and, how to spot it in our foods and how to sort of make some, healthy swaps when it comes to added sugar in our foods. But for me, it wasn't just, sweets, right? I mean, I knew that for me, my background being coming from the family that I come from, metabolic issues are very common, from type 2 diabetes to dementia, obesity, infertility. All those things were sort of what I grew up around. And so for me, I've just always sort of been in pursuit of how to learn more about how to take care of my body. And, the thing that Jamie led with that I think sometimes we hear, but it just kind of goes past us because we hear it all the time, but sugar, specifically blood sugar dysregulation, is the root cause of almost every major health issue that we have, from cancer to hypertension to metabolic issues related to obesity and diabetes. Like, what's the foundational thing that all those things have in common? It's blood sugar dysregulation. And it is not just sugar or sweets that raise our blood sugar. The other thing that's really important to consider are the effect of starches and other things like that on our blood sugar as well. So for me, I just wanted as much information as possible because there are so many good quality research studies that show that not everyone responds to food in the same way when it comes to blood sugar. So for me, I just wanted individual information. I'm just just someone that wanted as much information as I could get. So I went the continuous glucose monitor route to sort of see for my own self what worked for me and what didn't. And I've definitely gotten a lot of questions like, why is it important to measure your blood glucose level? Like, why is that a thing? Why are people wearing these now? If you're not a diabetic, you don't need them. And I kind of use the analogy of the heart rate monitor, right? Everybody tracks their heart rate now. Whether you actually look at it or not, it is on your watch. All of that heart rate data is there. And that gives us a lot of information, right? It's not just for folks that have an issue with their heart. It's not just for folks that have heart disease. Everyone knows that your resting heart rate is associated with, your cardiovascular health. If your heart rate goes up to 170 beats per minute, when you go up the stairs, something may be wrong, right? If your heart rate is 125 beats and you're just laying in the bed and you're not doing anything, that might be a sign of concern, right? And so our heart rate gives us vital information about what's going on inside of our body. What better measure of what's going inside of our body from a metabolic standpoint than what's our blood glucose? So for me, it was just a matter of, it just made sense to track that information. And to get, that real-time biofeedback of, hey, I ate this and I'm getting this response. Sorry. So why does it matter so much? Why does what happens to our blood glucose curve throughout the day matter? we all think from a paradigm of calories. It's just ingrained in us, especially with us growing up in the low fat revolution of the 80s and 90s. Low calorie is the way to go, right? Calories in equals calories out. That's what you want, you know, that whole mindset of, if you'll burn more than you eat, you'll lose weight, right? And that's what metabolism is. Well, the truth is that a calorie means nothing to our cells. Our calories are not a substrate or not what our cells are able to use for energy. Our cells use glucose. Glucose is the main energy source for our cells. So with that, how well our body uses that glucose is a reflection of how well our metabolism is functioning. So just another tidbit, we can also use fat as an energy source, but when there's excess glucose around, our body is not going to use fat. So our body is not going to burn fat if glucose is just a steady stream of glucose coming all day. So that's just, you know, an important fact, and that's just our nature. Glucose is quick, it's easy. Our body is going to always prefer that over fat. And without periods of homeostasis where our glucose levels are pretty level, we're never going to tap into those fat stores. So I think it's a really important point that if we consider just getting what the standard American, you know, approach to blood sugar is that you get it checked once a year at your checkup, and you get a fasting glucose level. And all right, if it's, you know, in that range of, they'll give you up to 100. That's good, right? And if you're 100 to 120, 125, you're pre-diabetic. If it's more than that, you may be considered a diabetic. But really just getting that one reading shows you nothing about what's happening day to day in response to the foods that you eat. It can be good first thing in the morning, but you can be on a blood sugar roller coaster all day. And all that resting blood glucose level means is that right now, your system is still working well. Insulin is being deployed. It's getting that glucose out of your system. It's clearing it, and it's getting it back down to a good level. But it's not really showing how much insulin does that take to do that? How much time did you spend in a spike? How much time did you spend with all that excess glucose running around? So that really doesn't give you the information that you need. And it takes years and years of those unregulated spikes day in, day out to start to cause the metabolic dysfunction that will eventually show up as diabetes way further down the road. So years and years of those spikes and dips, our cells eventually start to become resistant to the influx of insulin that's consistently dumped into our bloodstream to deal with sorry, I have a little technical dysfunction, to deal with that excess glucose. But what does not take years to develop are the negative things that come from those spikes. So from those day-to-day spikes, you can get weight gain, specifically gain of fat. It's going to affect your cholesterol levels, your triglyceride levels. That's right, glucose is stored as fat. Hormone dysregulation, skin issues, there are all sorts of short-term consequences that having those spikes in your glucose levels will cause. So in the long term, all of those negative health effects on this metabolic system not working well include all the things that we've already talked about: heart disease, cancer, even dementia. Alzheimer's is now being referred to as type 3 diabetes, not because it's fundamentally different than type 2, but because there are specific effects on our central nervous system and our brain that having those high glucose levels result in. So all of those things that I grew up seeing happen from metabolic issues, even dementia, are all rooted in poor glucose control. So, all right. So I'm about 5 weeks into wearing the blood glucose monitor, and really I've just sort of been a guinea pig for myself. I got a couple days on here. Every day I get a report on how well I did. Always getting real-time biofeedback. You see on the left, you see a little barbell, that means I exercised. And then you will see a spike related to that. The reason those things are not bad, the reason you get a spike during physical activity is that glucose is released from your liver and from your muscles in the form of glycogen, so that your cells have the energy they need to perform. But it does not take insulin to bring that back down. Just the contraction of our muscles is able to do that. Plus, it has a net positive effect on our overall health. So there's nothing negative about the spike that you get from physical activity. But you see just different meals throughout the day. It was pretty steady overall, if you look at the one on the left. And then you see, I was just describing this to Jamie, the dinner that I had is the far right circle with the knife and the spoon. I did all my things. I did all these little tricks that I've learned through this whole process. I had a glass of water with a little bit of vinegar in it. I timed my nutrients. I ate all my veggies first. I ate all my meat. And then I had a little bit of rice and a couple of bites of sushi. But the issue is, you see those spikes that I got. I ate dinner at 7:30 p.m. and I was asleep by 8:30. Going for a walk after you eat is one of the most profound ways to lower that blood glucose level. It doesn't matter what you ate. And even just going for a 2-minute walk can blunt that blood sugar curve. What I did was eat a carb heavy meal. I ate it in the right order and I did all the things that I was supposed to do. But then I went to bed, and then you see that blood glucose kind of roller coaster that I was on. I did not sleep well that night. I woke up feeling yucky. But had I had that meal at lunch, I would have metabolized it so different. So that's been sort of the most sort of validating thing for me, to see that I do respond in certain ways to not a lot of starch and not a lot of sugar. I mean, I really will get a pretty substantial increase. But for me, it's seeing how I can optimize that. Not that I don't want to have rice, and I love my Japanese food, but how can I have that and minimize the negative net effect on my body? And then this is one of my best days here on the right. I did not log all my food that day. I typically do not, but really just as a matter of learning this process more, I have been trying to write down what I eat just for tracking purposes here. I'm not tracking calories or anything like that. But you see the low is 70 here and the high is 110. So really trying to keep the spikes after a meal below 30 from where that resting glucose level was, and then trying to never let it go above 140, trying to just kind of keep it in that healthy range. And then I also get, you're going to have to, there we go. I also get specific profiles on the food that I eat. So here on the left, I entered what I had for lunch, which was just a veggie and meat heavy burrito bowl from Chipotle. It did have rice, but it was a lot of veggies, a lot of meat. I got a pretty substantial rise from that. And this was even going for a walk and doing all those things. That's going to play into my decision making. If I'm tired in the afternoon after lunch, and this is what I had for lunch, there's a really good reason for that. And then you see here on the right, this is what a good response or a very limited change in blood glucose. I went for a walk. You see the top one, and then at the bottom, that's when I had my snack, or it was my breakfast. And it was chia pudding with raspberries and protein powder mixed in, and pecans. Did not get a rise at all after that. So I'm just loving getting as much information as possible. I could talk about this forever. I know there's a few of you on here. We've got about 6 minutes left. If anyone on here has specific questions, I would love to just kind of open it up for you guys to like ask me specific questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now.
What kind of monitor are you using? Where'd you get this?
So I went through a company called Levels. There's a few different companies out there. Levels is just one that I heard of. There's a couple Instagram accounts and books that I've read that are associated with, the person that wrote the book has an Instagram account, right? Because everybody's Insta famous these days. But a couple books that I've read that have sort of pointed me in that direction. Glucose Revolution, the Instagram account is Glucose Goddess, and then Body Love, and her name is Kelly Levesque. But anyway, so following them, I listened to a podcast with Dr. Casey Means and Dr. Mark Hyman, and they were talking about Levels. And Levels is the sort of third-party company that has brought this technology to the masses. There's NutriSense as well, but I go through Levels. It's a few $100, like your intro fee is a few $100, and it's a couple $100 for the CGM. And the plan is to wear it for 3 months, but you can wear it as long as you want. So I don't plan to wear this forever, but just long enough to get as much information as I can in terms of making future decisions about food. Y'all can ask me specific questions about food, or, you know, things that I've learned or things that I've eaten and what kind of response I've gotten, or anything like that. I'm an open book. I mean, there are about 10 different hacks that I've learned. I don't have them all right here in front of me, but I'm interested in sharing any of those if anybody has any questions, like different things that you can do to blunt that blood sugar curve. But
hey, I was gonna ask about fruit and see if like if there's like a pretty do you limit like the amount of fruit you eat in a day like by a good bit, or a little more relaxed with fruit because of how all the things that are about it that are good for you?
I think that's a really good question, and I do think that I don't know that I respond as exactly like everyone else. What I will say in general, if you eat fruit by itself on an empty stomach, you're going to get a pretty substantial bump in your blood glucose levels. Now it's going to be higher with tropical fruits. So anything like pineapple, mango, things like that are really going to cause a higher rise. Bananas, some people yes, some people no. Berries are less likely to do that, but in general, I don't ever have fruit by itself. One of the recommendations that Jamie had that she and I talked about beforehand is always put clothes on your carbs, like eat it with something. Eat that fruit with some protein or with some nut butter. Pairing those things together absolutely blunts that blood sugar curve. But fruit is definitely one of those things that we think that we're eating healthy and we think that we're doing the right thing. And sometimes we are. And that was one of the some people get a pretty substantial rise from a banana and some people don't. Like you don't know. And so that's why I wanted that specific information. But in general, always have it with something else is going to help blunt that curve. But the answer is it depends always, but I'll always have it with something, and fruit can be tricky.
I mean, do you have an opinion about like oatmeal? I mean, I eat like protein oatmeal, right? They're from, I think it's from the brand Kind, Kind. But I mean, I've always wondered like, well, dang, should I just eating like plain no sugar oatmeal? And I mean, the difference in taste is pretty drastic, I won't lie. So
yeah, oatmeal is a starch. So, you know, we talked about, you know, sugar a good bit, but starch is broken down into glucose exactly the same. It's the same substrate. Once it gets into our body, glucose is the same as the glucose that you would have gotten from something that was sweet. So some people are better at metabolizing that than others. If you're adding protein in it, that's great. Definitely adding some sort of fat will help slow the metabolism of that as well, which is going to help blunt that blood sugar curve. But sugar is sugar, and whether it comes from fruit or, you know, a cane sugar, table sugar, or it comes from starch, that's glucose as well. So it is something to consider. But most of the time, you know, especially if you're very physically active, like timing your carbs matters, you know, all that matters. But I do think that as long as you're having it with the protein and fat and fiber, you're doing the best you can to kind of to minimize that. What would you say, Jamie?
thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to cut out soon. But yeah, Trey, especially with how active you are, I think adding protein to it would be great for you. And even, you know, having your oatmeal, then having some kind of side of another side of protein, you know, like I said, those chicken sausage links or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to cut out. We super appreciate you guys. You can message us anytime. If you have questions, message us on social, message us here. I hope you enjoyed the chat today, and we appreciate you guys' support.
Thank you. Bye.